Hello there. Welcome back to Haunting Vales. Tonight's mystery begins in the quiet village of Cobblestone Cross, where the arrival of a foreign Contessa brings elegance, curiosity, and unease. She moves through the village like a shadow wrapped in silk, always composed, always watched. But when something unsettling occurs soon after her arrival, the villagers are quick to whisper, coincidence, bad luck, misunderstanding. Miss Marple, however, notices the small details others miss, the guarded glances, the carefully chosen words, and the strange way the Contessa seems to already know too much about the village. Because sometimes the most graceful arrivals carry the darkest intentions. Before we uncover the truth behind the Contessa of Cobblestone Cross, don't forget to subscribe for more haunting Miss Marple mysteries on Haunting Vales. Chapter 1. The Contessa arrives at Cobblestone Cross. Rain drifted across Cobblestone Cross long before nightfall, soft rain tapping against cottage windows and creeping through the narrow stone lanes of the village. The lamps around the square glowed weakly through the fog, and chimney smoke curled lazily into the freezing evening air. Miss Marple sat quietly beside the fire in Rosebank Cottage, her knitting resting untouched in her lap. Every few moments her eyes wandered toward the sitting-room window, where raindrops slid slowly down the glass. Something about the evening felt wrong. Not danger exactly, but unease, the sort of feeling one gets before dreadful news arrives. Then headlights appeared through the fog. A large black motor car rolled slowly past her gate. Miss Marple lifted her head immediately. Cobblestone Cross rarely received visitors after dark, but this vehicle moved with strange confidence through the rain, smooth and silent, like a hearse drifting toward a funeral. She watched carefully as the motor car disappeared toward the far hill, where Black Hollow House stood alone among dead trees and rusting gates. By morning, the rumors had spread through the village like wildfire. The Contessa had arrived. Nobody knew where she came from. Nobody even knew her real name. Her driver spoke very little while buying supplies from the grocer, only that her employer had purchased Black Hollow House and intended to remain there through winter. That alone disturbed people. Nobody willingly stayed at Black Hollow during winter. The manor carried an unpleasant reputation throughout Cobblestone Cross. People whispered about strange lights inside empty rooms, footsteps echoing through locked corridors, and voices heard beneath the house during storms. One farmhand even claimed he once saw a pale face staring from the attic window late at night. Miss Marple rarely believed ghost stories. Still, Black Hollow had never been a cheerful place. Later that afternoon, the atmosphere around the village square changed completely. Conversation faded, heads turned slowly toward the fountain. The Contessa had arrived. Her motor car stopped beside the square, and the driver opened the rear door. The woman who stepped out seemed almost unreal against the pale winter sky, tall, elegant, entirely dressed in black. Her long coat brushed softly against the cobblestones, while silver buttons gleamed beneath the cloudy light. Gloves covered her hands completely, and a dark hat concealed part of her face. Every movement appeared calm and controlled, as though she had spent years being watched by strangers. People stared openly while she crossed the square. The butcher nearly dropped a tray of sausages. 2 schoolboys stopped kicking their football entirely. Mrs. Potts froze halfway through a sentence while watching the woman pass. But what unsettled Miss Marple most was not the woman herself, it was the expression on several faces nearby. Fear, real fear. The Contessa entered the antique shop beside the post office and remained there nearly 20 minutes. Finally, she emerged carrying a small wooden box wrapped carefully in brown paper. The box looked old, very old. Then she paused beside her motor car and glanced slowly across the square. Her eyes settled directly upon Miss Marple. For several long moments, neither woman moved. The Contessa smiled faintly, not warmly, not kindly either. It was the smile of someone carrying dangerous secrets. Then she stepped into the car and disappeared back toward Black Hollow House. That evening the storm worsened terribly. Wind roared through the trees surrounding the village, while rain battered rooftops hard enough to shake the windows. Miss Marple remained awake beside the fire long after midnight, while tea cooled untouched beside her chair. Then, suddenly, the telephone rang. The sharp sound shattered the silence of the cottage. She lifted the receiver slowly. For several seconds she heard nothing except static. Then a woman whispered softly, "Please, help me." The voice trembled badly. Miss Marple recognized it instantly. The Contessa. "I believe someone intends to kill me," the woman whispered desperately. "There's something hidden in this house, something people believed disappeared years ago." A loud sound echoed somewhere behind her, a door slamming violently, then footsteps, heavy footsteps moving slowly closer. "He knows about the box," the Contessa whispered. "He knows I took it." "Who does?" But the line crackled sharply. Another sound followed, breathing, low and heavy beside the receiver. Then silence, complete silence. The telephone connection died. Miss Marple remained still beside the fire as rain hammered against the windows outside. Something terrible had already begun inside Black Hollow House, and somewhere beyond the fog, upon the lonely hill above Cobblestone Cross, someone was walking quietly through the dark corridors of the manor, searching for the Contessa.
Chapter 2. The Whispers Inside Black Hollow. Morning arrived cold and colourless over Cobblestone Cross, thick fog hanging low across the village like smoke from some enormous unseen fire. Not a single bird could be heard among the trees surrounding Black Hollow House. Even the wind seemed strangely absent. The entire hill stood in dreadful silence. Miss Marple arrived shortly after 9, carrying only her umbrella and handbag. The iron gate groaned softly as she pushed it open and stepped onto the narrow path leading toward the manor. Rainwater dripped from dead rose vines tangled across the fencing. Cracked stone statues leaned crookedly among the weeds. Somewhere nearby, a raven cried once from the branches of a dying tree. The front door stood slightly open. That alone told her something was terribly wrong. Inside the house, the air smelled faintly of damp wood and candle wax. Shadows stretched along the corridor walls beneath the weak morning light. A grandfather clock ticked slowly somewhere deeper inside the manor. Otherwise, complete silence. No servants, no voices, no movement. Miss Marple walked carefully through the entrance hall, while faded portraits stared down from the walls around her. The entire place felt cold despite the dying fire somewhere nearby, almost as though the house itself had gone lifeless during the night. Then she reached the drawing room and stopped dead in the doorway. The Contessa sat motionless beside the fireplace, still dressed entirely in black, one pale hand hanging loosely from the armchair, her eyes frozen upward toward the ceiling. A thin black ribbon had been pulled tightly around her throat. The small wooden box from the antique shop rested open beside her chair upon the carpet, empty. Miss Marple stepped closer slowly. There was no sign of struggle anywhere in the room, nothing overturned, no broken glass, no blood upon the floor. Whoever killed her had done so calmly, carefully, almost politely. Then she noticed a note pinned neatly against the Contessa's coat. She talked too much. 3 words only, cold words, cruel words. Miss Marple stared silently at the message while the fire crackled weakly nearby. Then something else caught her attention near the fireplace, half hidden beneath the chair. Another piece of paper, older, dust-covered, folded tightly. Miss Marple bent slowly and picked it up. The paper trembled faintly between her fingers as she unfolded it beneath the firelight. The next body will be found in the cellar. For several long moments she said nothing. Then footsteps echoed suddenly through the corridor behind her, heavy footsteps. Inspector Graves entered the room moments later with 2 constables close behind him, tall, broad-shouldered, rain dripping from his dark coat onto the carpet. His tired eyes moved immediately toward the body beside the fire. "Well," he muttered quietly, "looks like the village finally got itself a proper nightmare." The constables began searching the room, while Inspector Graves questioned the servants gathered nervously in the hallway. There were only 4 of them inside the manor that night: the cook, the groundskeeper, an elderly maid named Mrs. Harrow, and the driver who brought the Contessa to the village. All appeared terrified, especially the maid. Mrs. Harrow kept twisting her hands together while glancing repeatedly toward the staircase behind her. "She was frightened all evening," the old woman whispered shakily. "After returning from the village, she locked herself inside the study for nearly 2 hours. Then later I heard shouting from upstairs, a man shouting." Inspector Graves looked up immediately. "What man?" "I don't know, sir," the maid whispered. "I never saw his face." Miss Marple watched the woman carefully. People often revealed more through fear than through words. Meanwhile, the groundskeeper swore he heard footsteps moving through the cellar around midnight, though he claimed he was too frightened to investigate. The driver insisted he saw lights burning inside the west wing, despite nobody using those rooms for years. Every answer created more questions, and the house itself seemed determined to keep its secrets. By afternoon, the storm clouds returned over Cobblestone Cross. Villagers gathered silently outside the gates of Black Hollow House, hoping for news. Rumors spread faster now. Some claimed the Contessa had been murdered over stolen money. Others whispered about hidden jewels, secret documents, blackmail. But Miss Marple cared less about rumors than details, small details, quiet details, the sort most people ignored. That evening, while Inspector Graves searched the study upstairs, Miss Marple wandered alone through the lower corridors of the manor. Eventually, she reached a narrow hallway near the servant quarters, where the wallpaper had begun peeling from the damp walls. Then she heard it, a sound. Soft, faint, almost impossible to notice. Crying. Someone was crying somewhere beneath the house. Miss Marple stood completely still, listening. The sound came again, low sobbing drifting upward through the floorboards. Slowly she moved toward the cellar door, hidden beneath the staircase. The handle felt ice-cold beneath her fingers. Then suddenly the crying stopped. Complete silence. Miss Marple opened the cellar door carefully and stared into the darkness below. Stone steps disappeared downward into blackness. Cold air drifted upward, carrying the smell of wet earth and something older, something rotten. Then from somewhere deep below came a single whisper, "Leave this house."
Chapter 3. The Secret Beneath Cobblestone Cross. Miss Marple stood at the top of the cellar stairs, still as stone, listening to the silence below. The house above her creaked softly in the storm. Distant footsteps moved somewhere on the upper floor, but down here there was only darkness and cold. Then she went down, step by step, careful, steady. The air changed as she descended, colder, heavier, filled with damp earth and mold, as though the house had grown older the deeper she went, the kind of age that did not belong to wood and stone alone, but to something buried and long forgotten. At the bottom she stopped. The cellar stretched into blackness. Old shelves leaned against the walls. Old barrels sat half-collapsed beneath dust and cobwebs, and somewhere ahead a faint lantern glow flickered like a dying pulse. Miss Marple moved toward it slowly. The light led her to a hidden doorway set into the stone, almost invisible, concealed behind old timber and shadow. It felt wrong simply standing there, as though it had never been meant to be found. She pushed it open. Cold air rushed out. Inside was a small chamber, and everything inside it told a story that had never been meant to reach daylight. Photographs covered the walls from floor to ceiling, villagers from Cobblestone Cross frozen in time, Mrs. Potts outside the bakery, the Reverend walking alone through fog, the butcher at dawn, even Miss Marple herself, captured in silence from windows and corners she never noticed. Someone had been watching the village for years, quietly, patiently, unforgivingly. On the table sat a single photograph of the Contessa, taken only recently, and beneath it lay a note written in dark ink. She remembered everything. Behind her, a floorboard creaked. Inspector Graves entered the doorway, breath heavy, coat soaked from rain, his eyes scanning the chamber before settling on Miss Marple. "You need to come upstairs," he said quietly. "There's another body." They returned together through the cellar and up into the manor, the storm above them growing louder, as though the house itself was unsettled by what lay beneath it. The drawing-room was already filled with silence when they arrived. The groundskeeper lay near the fireplace, lifeless, no sign of struggle, no overturned furniture, only stillness and the heavy weight of something that ended too quickly. And beside him, the empty wooden box that belonged to the Contessa. Miss Marple noticed something immediately. Mud, fresh and dark across the carpet, leading toward the rear corridor and out of the house. Someone had entered from outside, not through the front gate, not through the hall, but from the land beyond Black Hollow House. Inspector Graves stared at it for a long moment, then quietly muttered that it made no sense, but Miss Marple already understood. The cellar was not just a hiding place, it was a passage, a forgotten way beneath Cobblestone Cross, and someone had been using it for years. Before she could speak, suddenly footsteps thundered from upstairs, heavy, urgent, uncontrolled. Everyone rushed toward the sound. The storm shook the windows as they reached the second floor. One bedroom door stood wide open, lamp swinging wildly from the ceiling. Dr. Finch stood near the balcony doors, rain pouring over him, face pale, eyes wide with something close to panic. A gun trembled in his hand. "She knew me," he whispered hoarsely. "She recognized everything after all these years." But before Inspector Graves could step forward, another voice came from the doorway behind them, calm, cold, certain. "You're all still guessing wrong." Mrs. Harrow stood there, the old maid, but the fear that lived on her face was gone completely. She stepped into the room slowly, looking at each of them as if they were already too late to understand.
The Contessa was never the danger. She was only the one who came back to uncover what was buried here long before any of you arrived. Silence filled the room. Even the storm outside seemed to pause. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed as she studied her carefully. Mrs. Harrow smiled faintly, and then she moved, not toward the others, but straight through the open balcony doors, into the storm, gone in an instant. Only the wind remained. Hours later, Cobblestone Cross lay quiet again beneath the fog. Black Hollow House stood dark on its hill, sealed once more in silence, as though it had never truly woken at all. But Miss Marple knew better. As she looked out across the village through the mist, she understood the truth that would not leave her mind. The village was never haunted. It had been observed, patiently, for a very long time. And somewhere beneath Cobblestone Cross, in the forgotten tunnels no map recorded, something still waited in the dark, watching for whoever would come next.